Hello, my dear friends. It's your companion for another evening of shared stories and quiet contemplation. Tonight, we're venturing into territory that's equal parts thrilling and heartbreaking. We're discussing the deaths that await us in Stranger Things Season 5, the final chapter of a story that's been unfolding since 2016. Now, I know this topic might seem heavy for a sleep video, but there's something almost meditative about discussing theories and possibilities in the dark. It's like sitting around a campfire sharing ghost stories, except these ghosts might actually come to pass when the show returns. Before we dive deep into who might not make it out of Hawkins alive, let me set the scene for you. Stranger Things Season 5 is arriving in 3 parts, starting November 26th, 2025, with 4 episodes. Then on Christmas Day, we'll get 3 more episodes. And finally, on New Year's Eve, the series finale will stream, closing the book on this incredible story. The Duffer Brothers, the creative minds behind the show, have been remarkably candid about what awaits us. They've used words like brutal and violent to describe this final season. Ross Duffer told Entertainment Weekly directly that it's a brutal season, adding that it's very violent with stakes higher than ever. Matt Duffer echoed these sentiments, explaining that because you're hurtling through the end, a lot more is on the table. What's particularly interesting about these comments is the Duffer Brothers' promise that any deaths will feel earned. This is crucial because Stranger Things has always been somewhat gentle with its main cast. Sure, we've lost beloved characters. Barb Holland was taken by the Demogorgon in Season 1, leaving us with years of Justice for Barb campaigns. Bob Newby, played by Sean Astin, gave his life in Season 2 fighting Demodogs in the Hawkins lab. Billy Hargrove found redemption in Season 3, sacrificing himself to save Eleven from the Mind Flayer. And most recently, Eddie Munson's death in Season 4 left viewers absolutely devastated as he was torn apart by Demobats while buying time for his friends. But notice a pattern here. Every single one of these deaths involved characters who were introduced in the same season they died, or in Billy's case, a character who started as an antagonist. The core group, the kids who've been there since the beginning, have all survived, even when it looked like Hopper died at the end of Season 3. He came back in Season 4. Even when Max was clinically dead for over a minute, with broken bones and blindness, Eleven brought her back, and she's being kept alive in a coma. The show has been reluctant to truly kill off anyone from the original lineup. Season 5 changes everything. There's no Season 6 to soften the blow. There's no reset button. When someone dies this time, they're gone for good. And with Vecna's gates now merged into one massive rift tearing through Hawkins, with the Upside Down bleeding into our reality, with military occupation and monsters roaming the streets, the body count is going to climb. The question isn't whether main characters will die. The question is which ones and how many. Some deaths will be expected, fitting narrative arcs that have been building for seasons, but others, the ones we're going to explore tonight, will blindside us completely. These are the deaths no one will see coming, the characters who seem safe right up until they're not. So settle in, get comfortable, let the weight of your blankets anchor you as we explore every theory, every clue, every hint that the Duffer Brothers have dropped about who won't survive the final battle. We'll discuss the Wheeler family's potential tragedy, the Steve Harrington debate that's consuming the fandom, the forgotten Byers brother who might be the real sacrifice, and so many more possibilities. Some of these theories will seem outlandish at first, but by the time we're done examining the evidence, you might find yourself believing them too. Take a deep breath, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin our journey through the possible deaths that await us in Stranger Things, Season 5, The Wheeler Family, a household under siege. Let's start with perhaps the most shocking theory that's emerged from set photos and leaked episode titles, the possibility that the Wheeler family is about to be torn apart in ways we never expected. The Wheelers have been a constant presence since episode 1. Ted Wheeler, the stereotypical clueless dad who's more interested in his chicken dinner than anything else. Karen Wheeler, the well-meaning but often oblivious mother who's been nursing a glass of wine through most of the series. Nancy Wheeler, who transformed from a typical popular girl into a gun-wielding investigative journalist. Mike Wheeler, the heart of the original friend group and Eleven's boyfriend. And little Holly Wheeler, who's been a background presence for 4 seasons, but is apparently about to step into the spotlight in a major way. The most prevalent theory circulating through Reddit forums and social media is that Holly Wheeler is the character who disappears in Season 5's second episode. You see, the episode titles were leaked earlier this year, and Episode 2 is called The Vanishing of, with the second half redacted. Initially, leaked information suggested it was The Vanishing of Spoiler Wheeler, which immediately set the fandom ablaze with speculation. Is it Mike? Is it Nancy? But as more information emerged, all signs began pointing toward Holly. Set photographs from the production showed something that sent chills through the fan community. Images surfaced of Holly Wheeler, now played by actress Nell Fisher, following a recast to show the passage of time, appearing to have an encounter with Vecna in his human form as Henry Creel. In these photos, Holly is wearing specific clothing, a particular outfit that became important later. Additional set photos showed Holly riding her bike with Mike and Will, and crucially, she's wearing the exact same clothes as in the Vecna encounter photos. This suggests a sequence of events. Holly might be riding home from somewhere, possibly from Mike's house or from school, when she encounters what appears to be a man, Henry Creel's human form, which Vecna can apparently project as a lure. This mirrors Will Byers' disappearance almost perfectly. In the series premiere, Will was riding his bike home from Mike's house after a Dungeons & Dragons session when the Demogorgon appeared and chased him, ultimately dragging him into the Upside Down. The parallel is deliberate. The Duffer Brothers have repeatedly stated that Season 5 returns to the show's roots, recapturing the feeling of Season 1. What better way to do that than to bookend the series with a child's disappearance, showing how far we've come while reminding us where it all began? But there's more to this theory than simple narrative symmetry. During a recent interview, Matt Duffer revealed something surprising. He explained that Holly Wheeler, being a centerpiece of Season 5, was a discovery they made while breaking the season. He said they wanted to recapture some of the feeling of Season 1, and some of that you can't recapture unless you have kids, because their original kids aren't kids anymore. Bringing Holly and her classmates into the story allowed them to reintroduce that early season innocence and wonder to the darker tone of the final season. A Time magazine article from their set visit described witnessing what appears to be a hallucination sequence starring Holly Wheeler. The journalist watched as Holly wandered through a labyrinthine orange rock formation wearing a 1950s era blue A-line dress reminiscent of Alice in Wonderland, with blood smeared across her forehead. This Alice in Wonderland imagery is particularly significant. There's a fan theory, partially debunked, but with interesting elements, that suggested Karen Wheeler might be Alice Creel, Henry's younger sister who was supposedly killed along with their mother. The stage show Stranger Things. The first shadow confirmed that Karen and Alice are different people, but the Alice imagery surrounding Holly suggests some other connection. Perhaps Holly represents innocence being corrupted by the Upside Down. Perhaps Vecna sees her as a way to hurt the Wheeler family, specifically Nancy and Mike, who have been obstacles to his plans since the beginning. In Season 4, Vecna gave Nancy horrifying visions of her future, showing her the entire Wheeler family dead. What if that wasn't just a psychological attack? What if it was foreshadowing? Taking Holly would destabilize not just the Wheelers, but all of Hawkins. She's approximately 7 or 8 years old at this point in the story, young enough that her disappearance would be absolutely devastating in a way that's different from Will's. Will was 12, old enough to survive in the Upside Down for a week using his wits. Holly is much younger, more vulnerable, more innocent. The trailer for Season 5 includes a brief shot that fans have scrutinized endlessly. There's a figure falling through the sky in the Upside Down, tumbling through clouds and floating debris with red lightning crackling around them. At first, many assumed this was Will Byers, given his connection to that dimension and his key role in the final season. But when you zoom in and compare the clothing and build of the falling figure to Holly Wheeler in other trailer scenes, there are remarkable similarities. It looks like it could be her, falling through the Upside Down's twisted sky in what might be an Alice in Wonderland-style journey through a nightmare dimension. Now here's where it gets even darker. If Holly does vanish into the Upside Down, the Wheeler family won't just be dealing with the terror of losing their youngest child. They'll be dealing with it while the Upside Down is actively invading Hawkins, while military forces have the town under quarantine, while monsters roam the streets. There's no normal search party this time. There's no hiding what's happening from the community. Everyone will know. And unlike in Season 1, the gang knows exactly where to look and what they're up against, which somehow makes it more tragic rather than less. This brings us to Ted Wheeler, the character who's been comic relief for 4 seasons. Ted represents a very specific type of 1980s American father, well-meaning but checked out, more concerned with his comfort and routine than with truly engaging with his family. He's been the butt of jokes, the one who's always napping in his recliner or complaining about disruptions to his schedule. But actor Joe Trest has hinted in interviews that Ted finally gets involved this season, suggesting he'd want a shot at the Upside Down. Think about what that means. For 4 seasons, Ted has been blissfully ignorant of the supernatural chaos surrounding his family. His son has been harboring a girl with psychic powers in their basement. His daughter has been hunting monsters from another dimension. His youngest daughter saw strange lights and heard voices in season 1, and Ted noticed none of it, or if he did, he dismissed it as teenage drama and childhood imagination. But when Holly disappears, when the Upside Down's corruption is visible on every street corner, when creatures from nightmares are physically present in Hawkins, Ted can't ignore it anymore. Imagine Ted Wheeler, this stereotype of suburban dad mediocrity, finally stepping up to protect his family. Imagine him grabbing a weapon, probably without any idea how to use it effectively, and charging into danger because his little girl needs him. It would be both heroic and heartbreaking, a redemption arc compressed into a single act of desperate fatherly love. And if Ted were to die in the attempt, if he were to fall trying to save Holly or one of his other children, it would fundamentally change the Wheeler family dynamic. There's a scene in the trailer that has fans particularly concerned. Nancy Wheeler is shown crying while washing blood off her hands. The blood appears to be on her hands and possibly splattered on her clothing. Her face is a mask of grief and horror. The question everyone's asking is, whose blood is she washing away? Did she kill someone in self-defense, or did someone die in her arms? Multiple theories have emerged. Some think it's Steve's blood, that he dies protecting her and she holds him as he goes. Others think it's Jonathan's blood, her boyfriend meeting a tragic end. But there's another possibility that's gaining traction. What if it's her father's blood? Imagine Nancy, the capable and brave fighter who's faced down monsters and government conspiracies, having to watch her bumbling father try to be a hero. Imagine her being unable to stop him from getting himself killed. The guilt would be enormous. The grief would be compounded by regret, by the knowledge that she's spent years dismissing Ted as irrelevant, rolling her eyes at his dad jokes and his obliviousness. And now he's gone, having finally stepped up when it mattered most, and she never got to tell him that she loved him despite his flaws. There's also a shot in the trailer of Karen and Holly hiding in a bathtub. This immediately calls to mind classic horror movie imagery, the bathtub as a place of false safety. In the upside-down infected Hawkins, there is no safety, not even behind locked doors in your own home. The fact that Karen is specifically protecting Holly, that they're cowering together in the bathroom, suggests that something has breached the Wheeler home. Is it Vecna himself? Is it Demogorgons or Demobats? Or is it something worse? Something we haven't seen yet? Karen Wheeler has been a more interesting character than many give her credit for. Actress Cara Buono has mentioned in interviews that she adds wine glasses to Karen's scenes deliberately, showing a woman who's using alcohol to cope with a failing marriage and a sense that her life didn't turn out how she'd hoped. In season 3, Karen nearly had an affair with Billy Hargrove, showing up to meet him at a hotel before changing her mind when she realized what she'd be throwing away. She's been a good mother, but a somewhat distant one, loving but not particularly attentive to what's really happening in her children's lives. Season 5 appears to be changing that. Karen is getting more screen time, a fact that has some fans worried rather than excited. In Stranger Things, increased focus on a previously minor character often precedes their death, a way to make the audience care more before taking them away. If Karen becomes a more active participant in the story, if she finally sees the truth about the Upside Down and steps up to protect her family, it makes her a target. Vecna has shown that he enjoys tormenting families, enjoys making people watch their loved ones suffer. Taking out one or both Wheeler parents would be a way to hurt Nancy and Mike while destabilizing Hawkins' society. The Wheelers are meant to represent normalcy, the ideal American family. Destroying that ideal would send a message that no one is safe. Some theories suggest that both Wheeler parents will be seriously injured but survive, allowing them to appear in a potential epilogue showing the aftermath of the final battle. Others think Karen survives, but Ted doesn't, leaving her as a widow, forced to console her traumatized children while dealing with her own grief and guilt. And still others believe that if Holly is taken to the Upside Down, Karen might sacrifice herself to save her daughter, a mother's love proving stronger than the darkness. The Wheeler family tragedy, whatever form it takes, will serve multiple narrative purposes. It will raise the stakes, showing that even families who've been on the periphery of the action aren't safe anymore. It will give Nancy and Mike additional motivation in the final battle, making their fight against Vecna deeply personal in a new way. And it will show the audience that this season really is different, that the Duffer Brothers meant what they said about being brutal and violent. If they're willing to kill off the Wheelers, to traumatize Holly, or murder Ted, or threaten Karen, then truly no one is safe. Everyone is on the table, and that uncertainty, that genuine fear for every character, will make the final episodes almost unbearably tense. As we watch Holly perhaps vanish into the Upside Down, as we see Ted possibly make a futile, heroic last stand, as we witness Karen trying desperately to protect what's left of her family, we'll be reminded of why Stranger Things resonated with audiences in the first place. It's not just about the monsters or the 1980s nostalgia or the supernatural mysteries. It's about families, about communities, about ordinary people facing extraordinary evil and finding courage they didn't know they possessed. The Wheelers represent that ordinariness, and their tragedy will remind us that in this final battle, heroism and victimhood are often the same thing. Steve Harrington, the death everyone fears. Now we come to perhaps the most debated death theory in the entire fandom, the possibility that Steve Harrington won't survive season 5. If you've spent any time in Stranger Things discussion spaces over the past few years, you've encountered this theory. It comes up constantly, persistently, like a specter haunting the fandom. And for good reason, because from a narrative perspective, Steve's death makes perfect sense. That doesn't mean we want it to happen. In fact, the thought of losing Steve is so universally painful that many fans are in complete denial, insisting the Duffer Brothers wouldn't dare. But let's examine the evidence with clear eyes, even if it breaks our hearts. Steve Harrington's character arc is one of the best redemptions in television history. When we first met him in season 1, he was the stereotype of the high school jerk. The popular guy dating Nancy Wheeler, more concerned with his social status than with being a good person. He was friends with Tommy and Carol, who were even worse, and he participated in some genuinely mean behavior, including spray painting slut-shaming graffiti about Nancy. By all rights, we should have hated him. But then Jonathan Byers beat him up, and in the aftermath, Steve had a moment of clarity. He realized he'd been acting like a jerk. He cleaned the graffiti off the theater marquee. He showed up to apologize to Jonathan and Nancy, only to find them fighting the Demogorgon, and instead of running away, Steve grabbed his nail-studded baseball bat and jumped into the fray. That moment redefined his character. In Season 2, we saw Steve grappling with his breakup with Nancy, while also becoming an unlikely babysitter to Dustin Henderson and the other kids. The scene where Steve gives Dustin dating advice, where this former popular kid treats a nerdy freshman with genuine kindness and respect, showed how much he'd grown. By Season 3, Steve had become the ultimate big brother figure, protecting the kids while working a humiliating job at Scoops Ahoy. His popularity and social status stripped away to reveal the good person underneath. His friendship with Robin Buckley, the band geek who turned out to be gay, further showed his evolution. When Robin came out to him, Steve didn't flinch. He accepted her completely, and they became best friends with zero romantic tension, which was refreshing and beautiful. Season 4 showed us Steve at his most heroic. He dove into the Upside Down to save Nancy without hesitation. He fought Demobats that were literally eating him alive. He revealed his dreams for the future to Nancy, talking about wanting 6 kids, wanting a big family, wanting to fill an RV with loved ones and travel the country. These dreams were poignant because they showed us what Steve had lost when Nancy left him and what he still hoped to find. He's a romantic at heart, a protector, someone who wants to create the family and love and security that he apparently didn't have growing up. His parents are never around, barely mentioned. Steve has essentially been raising himself while simultaneously adopting Dustin and the other kids as his weird little family. This arc, from jerk to hero, from self-centered teenager to selfless protector, is complete. Steve has been fully redeemed. He's proven his worth 100 times over. He's become one of the most beloved characters in the show, with fans making Protect Steve a rallying cry. And that's exactly why his death would be so impactful. The Duffer Brothers have said they want any deaths in Season 5 to feel earned, to serve the story rather than being shock value. Steve sacrificing himself to save the people he loves would be the ultimate culmination of his journey. It would show that he's come full circle from the selfish boy who cared only about his reputation to the man who would give his life for his friends. There's specific evidence in the Season 5 trailer that has fans terrified. There's a scene, brief but powerful, of Dustin Henderson hugging Steve tightly. Dustin appears to be crying or on the verge of tears. Steve is holding him, and the emotion in this moment is palpable, even in a few seconds of footage. Fans immediately interpreted this as a goodbye scene, as Dustin and Steve sharing one last moment before Steve goes off to do something incredibly dangerous. The bond between these two characters has been one of the show's highlights. Dustin lost his friend, Eddie Munson, in Season 4, watching him die heroically. If Dustin also loses Steve, his other mentor and big brother figure, it would be absolutely devastating. But it would also be dramatically powerful, showing Dustin being forced to grow up, forced to become the protector rather than the protected. Actor Joe Keery has been notably emotional in interviews when discussing the end of Stranger Things. He's talked about how meaningful Steve's journey has been, how much he's loved playing this character, how bittersweet it is to say goodbye. While these comments could just be about the show ending, fans read deeper meaning into them. Kiri's not just sad about the show ending, he's sad about how it ends. And if Steve dies, that would certainly explain the emotion. Some fans have analyzed every frame of Kiri in behind the scenes content, looking for clues about his character's fate, though of course the Duffer Brothers and the cast are being very careful not to spoil anything. There's an interesting meta-narrative element to Steve's potential death as well. Joe Keery is a talented actor who's been pursuing other projects, including music under the name Geo and various film roles. He's shown interest in expanding his career beyond Steve Harrington. From a practical standpoint, killing Steve gives Keery a clean break from the character, allowing him to fully move on without the expectation that Steve might return in some future spin-off or special. The Duffer Brothers have stated there won't be a traditional Stranger Things spin-off continuing the main story, but there are plans for expanded universe content. Steve dying would remove any pressure for Keery to remain tied to the franchise. But here's where it gets interesting. Some fans, perhaps motivated by hope more than evidence, think that the very fact that everyone expects Steve to die means he won't. They argue that the Duffer Brothers are setting up a red herring using trailer footage and narrative expectations to make us think Steve is doomed, only to subvert those expectations and kill someone else instead. There's precedent for this. Before Season 4 aired, many fans were convinced Steve would die in that season, and he didn't. Netflix even put up a Protect Steve billboard before Season 4 Part 2 released, which some interpreted as trolling the fandom about their fears. The red herring theory suggests that all this focus on Steve in the trailer, all these emotional moments with Dustin, are misdirection. The Duffer Brothers want us looking at Steve, so we don't see the real death coming. And who would that real death be? The most popular alternative is Jonathan Byers, Nancy's current boyfriend, whose death would clear the way for Nancy and Steve to reunite while also being tragic and impactful. We'll discuss Jonathan more in the next section, but the idea is that fans are so busy worrying about Steve that they're not noticing the actual foreshadowing of Jonathan's demise. There's also an argument that killing Steve would be too predictable, too obvious. The Duffer Brothers like to surprise their audience, and if everyone is expecting Steve to die, perhaps they'll keep him alive just to subvert expectations. Some fans have pointed out that in the trailer, we actually don't see much of Steve in combat situations. Most of his scenes are emotional moments or planning scenes. If he were going to die heroically in battle, wouldn't the trailer show him in more action sequences to build up to that moment? The relative absence of Steve in action could mean he's being sidelined for story reasons, kept safe while others take the bigger risks. My personal take, and this is just speculation based on the evidence available, is that the Duffer Brothers are in a difficult position with Steve. They know fans love him. They know his death would cause genuine grief, not just for the characters, but for the audience. But they also know that keeping every fan-favorite character alive would undermine the stakes they're trying to build. If Steve survives after 4 seasons of diving headfirst into danger, if he keeps dodging death despite constantly putting himself in harm's way, it starts to strain credibility. At some point, someone's luck has to run out, and dramatically, Steve's death would have enormous impact. It would hit Dustin, Robin, Nancy, and the rest of the characters hard. It would hit the audience hard. It would show that this final battle has real consequences. But perhaps, and this is the outcome many fans are hoping for, Steve survives the final battle itself. He makes it through the fighting, the monsters, the confrontation with Vecna. Maybe he's injured, maybe he has close calls, but he survives. And then, in the aftermath, in the epilogue that shows what happens after Vecna is defeated, we see Steve getting his dream. We see him with a family, with the 6 kids he always wanted, with the life he'd hoped for. Or alternatively, we see him heading off to college finally, or taking a road trip with Robin, or simply getting to be a young man with a future. The survival of Steve would be the show's way of saying that sometimes the good guys do make it out alive, that sometimes the hero's reward is simply getting to live. Whatever happens, the fandom will be watching Steve's scenes with bated breath, analyzing every moment for clues about his fate. The love for this character, this reformed jerk who became the group's protector, is so strong that his death would be mourned in a very real way. People have Steve Harrington tattoos. They have shirts with his face on them. They've written countless stories imagining his future. He represents the hope that people can change, can become better than they were, can find purpose in protecting others. Losing him would hurt, but it would also be a reminder that heroism often comes with a price, and sometimes the price is everything. Jonathan Byers, The Quiet Sacrifice. No one sees coming. While everyone's busy worrying about Steve Harrington, there's another character whose death would be equally tragic, but is flying under most people's radar. Jonathan Byers, the eldest son of the Byers family, Will's protective older brother, Nancy Wheeler's boyfriend, has been somewhat sidelined in recent seasons. And that very sidelining might be foreshadowing his demise. Let me explain why Jonathan's death is not only possible, but perhaps even more likely than Steve's. Jonathan Byers was a central character in seasons 1 and 2. In the first season, he was the artistic loner, the kid who found solace behind a camera lens, who didn't fit in with the popular crowd, but was deeply devoted to his family. When his younger brother Will disappeared, Jonathan drove himself to exhaustion searching, refusing to believe Will was dead, even when everyone else had given up hope. He formed an unlikely alliance with Nancy Wheeler, the popular girl dating Steve Harrington, and together they discovered the monster hunting in Hawkins. Their shared trauma and determination to expose the truth brought them together, and by season 2, they were a couple. Season 2 showed us Jonathan as the responsible older brother, picking Will up from his Dungeons and Dragons games at the Wheelers, working jobs to help support his family after his father Lonnie abandoned them. When Will became possessed by the Mind Flayer, Jonathan was there, helping to burn the entity out of his brother's body, willing to hurt Will in the short term to save him in the long term. The love between these brothers has always been one of the show's emotional cores. Jonathan would do anything for Will, sacrifice anything, endure anything to keep his little brother safe. But starting in season 3, and especially in season 4, Jonathan's role diminished. He moved to California with his family after Hopper's apparent death and the Byers' need to leave Hawkins. In season 4, Jonathan spent most of his time with his new stoner friend Argyle, getting high and seemingly adrift in life. The passionate, determined Jonathan of earlier seasons seemed to have been replaced with someone directionless and detached. His relationship with Nancy became strained, not because they didn't love each other, but because they were on different paths. Nancy wanted to attend Emerson College in Boston, pursuing her dreams of investigative journalism. Jonathan realized he couldn't afford to go with her, that he needed to stay close to his family and take care of Will and his mother Joyce. But he didn't tell Nancy this, didn't communicate his fears and obligations, and their relationship suffered for it. Meanwhile, back in Hawkins, Nancy and Steve were spending time together, and old feelings seemed to be resurfacing. Steve told Nancy about his dreams for a future family. Nancy seemed to be reconsidering her relationship with Jonathan, wondering if she and Steve might actually be better suited after all. By the end of season 4, when Jonathan finally reunited with Nancy in Hawkins, there was an awkwardness between them, a sense that something fundamental had changed. Here's why all of this matters for Jonathan's potential death. From a narrative perspective, the love triangle between Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve needs resolution. It's been dragging on for multiple seasons now, and season 5 doesn't have time for romantic drama when the world is ending. The cleanest way to resolve it, the way that would be both tragic and definitive, would be to kill Jonathan. His death would devastate Will, who would lose his protector and best friend. It would shatter Joyce, who would lose her oldest child, and it would free Nancy from the love triangle while also giving her enormous grief and guilt to process. There's another layer to this as well. Jonathan has spent his entire life being the responsible one, putting his family's needs ahead of his own dreams. He's worked terrible jobs to help pay bills. He's set aside his artistic ambitions to be practical and dependable. He's sacrificed his relationship with Nancy rather than be selfish and follow her to Boston while his family needs him in California. Jonathan's entire character arc has been about sacrifice, about what it means to be the oldest child in a struggling family, about carrying burdens that no teenager should have to carry. If his final act is to sacrifice himself to save Will, to protect his little brother one last time, it would be a heartbreaking culmination of everything his character represents. The scene in the trailer of Nancy washing blood off her hands could very easily be Jonathan's blood. Imagine Nancy and Jonathan going into battle together, fighting side by side as they did in seasons 1 and 2. Imagine Jonathan getting injured, mortally wounded, and Nancy holding him as he dies. Imagine him using his last breaths to tell Nancy it's okay, that she should be with Steve if that's what makes her happy, that she shouldn't feel guilty about moving on. Imagine him asking Nancy to watch over Will for him, to help protect his little brother because Jonathan won't be there to do it anymore. The emotional weight of that scene would be enormous. There's also evidence in how Charlie Heaton, the actor who plays Jonathan, has been used in recent seasons. He's had significantly less screen time and less important plot lines. Some of this might be due to scheduling conflicts or creative choices, but it could also be the writers deliberately sidelining his character before killing him off. When a show wants a death to really hurt, They sometimes give that character more focus in their final season, building them up before taking them away. But another approach is to let them fade into the background so their death comes as a genuine shock. Fans have been so focused on Steve and his hero arc that they've forgotten to worry about Jonathan. Reddit discussions about Season 5 deaths have increasingly pointed to Jonathan as a likely casualty. One fan put it succinctly, saying they're leaning heavily toward Jonathan because the trailer has given him and Nancy prominent focus, which often happens when a character is slated to die. The show wants their death to hit viewers emotionally, so they remind us why we care about them first. Another Redditor noted that Jonathan dying would serve multiple narrative purposes. It resolves the love triangle. It gives Nancy a crushing burden of grief and guilt that will fuel her fight against Vecna. It gives Will additional trauma and motivation. It devastates Joyce and shows that even the main families aren't safe. It's efficient storytelling, as brutal as that sounds. There's also a thematic resonance to Jonathan dying while Will survives. In Season 1, Will disappeared and was presumed dead, and Jonathan refused to give up on him. Now, in Season 5, if their roles reverse, if Jonathan is the one who doesn't make it home while Will survives, it would be a tragic inversion. Will would be forced to live with the guilt and grief of being saved by his brother's sacrifice. He'd have to figure out how to move forward without the person who's protected him his entire life. That's powerful character development for Will, even as it's devastating for the audience. One counter-argument to the Jonathan death theory is that it might be too cruel to Joyce Byers. She's already lost her husband to divorce, lost Bob Newby to Demodogs, almost lost Will multiple times, almost lost Hopper, and dealt with constant trauma and upheaval. Killing her oldest son might be a bridge too far, too much suffering heaped on one character. Winona Ryder's Joyce has been the emotional heart of the adult storyline, the mother who will move heaven and earth to protect her children. Robbing her of Jonathan would be almost too dark, even for a final season that's promised to be brutal. But then again, maybe that's exactly why it will happen. Maybe the point is that not everyone gets a happy ending, that sometimes good people lose children they love, and that the war against the Upside Down has real costs that can't be undone. Joyce surviving but having to bury Jonathan would show the true price of victory. It would give her an incredibly difficult emotional journey in the final episodes, processing grief while still trying to save Will and Hawkins. It would show that being a hero doesn't mean you're protected from tragedy. The quiet nature of Jonathan's potential sacrifice is what makes it so fitting for his character. He's never been the flashy hero. He's never been the one giving rousing speeches or making grand gestures. He's the guy in the background, taking photos, observing, doing what needs to be done without seeking recognition. If he dies, it probably won't be in some big dramatic sacrifice that everyone witnesses. It'll be in a quieter moment, protecting Will or Nancy or his mother, doing what he's always done, putting himself last and his loved ones first. And maybe that's the most heroic thing of all. As we move toward the Season 5 release, keep an eye on Jonathan's scenes. Pay attention to his interactions with Will, with Nancy, with his mother. Look for moments that could be read as goodbyes or is him making peace with his life? Because while everyone's watching Steve swing his nail bat and preparing to mourn him, Jonathan Byers might be the one who slips away, sacrificing himself with the same quiet determination he's shown throughout the series. And when it happens, when we realize we didn't see it coming, the impact will be all the more devastating. Will Byers, the boy who started it all. Now we turn to perhaps the most emotionally complex death theory in all of Stranger Things, the possibility that Will Byers, the character whose disappearance started the entire series, might not survive the final battle. This theory is gaining traction across fan communities, and the more you examine the evidence, the more it feels almost inevitable. But it's also almost too painful to contemplate, which might be exactly why the Duffer Brothers would do it. Will Byers has been the heart of Stranger Things from the very first moment. The Vanishing of Will Byers was the title of the series premiere, the event that kicked off everything we've experienced over 4 seasons. When Will disappeared into the Upside Down, his mother Joyce refused to believe he was dead, communicating with him through Christmas lights and sheer force of maternal will. His friends Mike, Dustin, and Lucas set out to find him, encountering Eleven along the way. His disappearance exposed the gate beneath Hawkins' lab, revealed the existence of the Upside Down, and set in motion a chain of events that would endanger the entire world. But Will's story didn't end when he was rescued in Season 1. The Upside Down left its mark on him. In Season 2, he was possessed by the Mind Flayer, the massive shadow entity that sought to use Will's body as a spy and eventual host for its invasion of our world. Will experienced what they called now memories, seeing through the Mind Flayer's eyes, feeling what it felt, knowing what it knew. Even after they burned the Mind Flayer out of him in an agonizing exorcism, his connection to the Upside Down remained. Throughout seasons 3 and 4, Will has retained his ability to sense when the Upside Down is active, feeling a tingling on the back of his neck like a warning system. This ongoing connection between Will and the Upside Down is central to the theory that he might have to die to defeat Vecna. You see, there's been a recurring statement in the show since Season 2. If the mind dies, the body dies. This was established when talking about the Mind Flayer and its control over the Demodogs and other creatures. Kill the Mind Flayer, and everything connected to it dies. The hive mind ceases to function. Several fan theories suggest that Will Byers is somehow the true mind of the Upside Down, or at least has become so interconnected with it that he's essentially a bridge between dimensions. When he was in the Upside Down for a week in Season 1, something changed him. When the Mind Flayer possessed him in Season 2, something permanent was established. Will can sense the Upside Down. The Upside Down, in turn, seems drawn to Will. Vecna seems to have a particular interest in Will based on promotional materials and the Season 5 trailer. If Will really is connected to the Upside Down at this fundamental level, then closing the gates permanently, destroying Vecna's hold on our world, might require Will's death. If he's the bridge, then breaking the bridge would seal the dimensions apart. It's a horrifying thought, but one that makes a certain brutal narrative sense. The series began with Will's disappearance. It would end with his death, bringing the story full circle in the most tragic way imaginable. There's another layer to this theory. Some fans believe that Will might choose to sacrifice himself. Throughout the series, Will has been the victim. He was taken against his will, possessed against his will, traumatized by events beyond his control. He's the character who had no agency, no choice in what happened to him. But if in the end, Will chooses to give his life to save his friends, his family, and the world, it would transform him from victim to hero. It would be him finally taking control of his own story, making the ultimate choice, the ultimate sacrifice. For a character who's been powerless so often, this would be a way to assert his power in the most definitive way possible. Noah Schnapp, the actor who plays Will, has hinted in interviews that Season 5 gives his character the spotlight he's been missing. After being sidelined for much of Season 4's California plotline, Will is apparently central to the final season's events. The Duffer Brothers have told Schnapp that Will's arc comes full circle and that his role in the final battle is really significant. This increased importance could mean Will is the key to victory, which is good news, or it could mean Will is the key to victory through his death, which is the darkest possible outcome. The Season 5 trailer shows Will in several important scenes. There's a shot of him investigating a creepy tree, clearly following some lead about the Upside Down. There's footage of him with the rest of the group, clearly back in Hawkins and part of the final stand. But there's also something in his eyes in these scenes, a weight, a knowledge, like he's carrying a terrible secret. Some fans have wondered if Will already knows he's going to die, if he's realized that he's the final piece in defeating Vecna and has accepted his fate. Think about what Will's death would mean for the other characters. Mike Wheeler, his best friend, would be absolutely shattered. The entire series began with Mike's desperate search for Will. Their friendship is the foundation of the show, the pure love between two kids who just wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons and be together. Losing Will would break something in Mike. Eleven, who's in love with Mike, would have to watch the boy she loves grieve his best friend. She's already dealing with so much guilt about her role in creating Vecna and opening the gates. If Will dies to close those gates, she'll carry that burden too. Joyce Byers has fought so hard for so long to keep Will alive. In Season 1, she refused to accept his death even when everyone told her to give up. She strung lights all over her house to communicate with him. She dove into the Upside Down herself to bring him home. In Season 2, she helped free him from the Mind Flayer's possession. She moved her entire family to California to give Will a fresh start. If Joyce loses Will now, after everything she's done to save him, it would be absolutely devastating. It would feel like all her efforts, all her love, all her maternal ferocity wasn't enough in the end. And Jonathan, Will's older brother, would be destroyed by survivor's guilt. Jonathan has spent his entire life protecting Will. We just discussed how Jonathan might die sacrificing himself for Will. But what if it's the other way around? What if Jonathan survives but Will doesn't? Jonathan would have to live with the knowledge that he couldn't protect his little brother. In the end, that Will died while Jonathan lived. That's a guilt that might never heal. There's also a meta-narrative element to consider. Killing Will would be the boldest, darkest choice the Duffer Brothers could make. It would signal that they're not interested in a safe, happy ending where all the main characters ride off into the sunset. It would show that the war against the Upside Down has real consequences, that heroism sometimes means paying the ultimate price. It would be unexpected because fans have come to see Will as sort of untouchable, the character who's suffered so much already that surely he deserves to survive. Subverting that expectation would create genuine shock and grief in the audience. Some fans have pointed to an interesting pattern. Several major characters who died in previous seasons had names starting with the letter B: Barb Holland, Bob Newby, Billy Hargrove. While this is probably coincidence, it's become a sort of joke in the fandom. If the B name pattern holds, then Will Byers would fit. Again, this is almost certainly just pattern seeking, where no pattern exists, but it's the kind of detail fans latch onto when they're anxious about character deaths. There's also a possibility that the title, The Vanishing of, in Episode 2 refers to Will, not Holly Wheeler, as most fans assume. What if Will vanishes again, taken by Vecna or pulled into the Upside Down, and the rest of the season is about trying to save him one final time? And what if this time, despite everyone's best efforts, they can't save him? Or that would be a brutal echo of the series premiere, the same situation with a different, tragic outcome. The counter-argument to Will dying is simple. It's too dark, too cruel, too much suffering heaped on characters who've already been through so much. The Duffer Brothers have created a show that, despite its horror elements, has always maintained a sense of hope. The good guys have always won. The main characters have always survived. Killing Will would fundamentally change the tone of that ending, making it much bleaker than anything we've seen before. And after 4 seasons of watching Will suffer, of watching Joyce fight to save him, of watching this sweet kid who just wants to play D&D get traumatized again and again, do we really need to watch him die? Haven't he and his family been through enough? But maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the question is whether Will's death would mean something, whether it would serve the story and honor his character. If Will chooses to sacrifice himself, if he goes into that final moment with courage and love for his friends and family, if his death is what saves the world, then it's not meaningless suffering. It's heroism. It's a kid who's been powerless taking power. It's the victim becoming the savior. And in that transformation, there might be something beautiful even in the tragedy. As we watch Season 5 unfold, pay close attention to Will. Listen to what he says. Watch who he says goodbye to. Notice if there are moments that feel like he's preparing for something. Because if the series that began with the vanishing of Will Byers ends with the death of Will Byers, bringing us full circle from his first disappearance to his final one, it will be one of the most devastating endings in television history. And it might also be one of the most fitting, the ultimate sacrifice made by the character who suffered first and longest, the boy who started it all. Murray Bauman, the conspiracy theorist's last stand. Let's shift now to a character whose death would be significant, but might not immediately come to mind when thinking about major casualties. Murray Bauman, the paranoid conspiracy theorist turned reluctant hero, has been with us since Season 2, and there's a growing sense among fans that his number might be up in Season 5. The interesting thing about Murray is that his potential death feels almost inevitable, precisely because of the type of character he is. Let me explain why he's such a likely candidate for a badass final exit. Murray was introduced in Season 2 as a former journalist who'd been investigating the strange happenings in Hawkins. He lived alone in Illinois, surrounded by conspiracy boards and vodka bottles, dismissed by mainstream society as a crackpot. But as Nancy and Jonathan discovered when they brought him evidence of Hawkins Lab's crimes, Murray was absolutely right about everything. He helped them create a watered-down version of the truth that they could feed to the media, a version that was believable enough to take down parts of the conspiracy while protecting the more unbelievable elements from ridicule. What makes Murray fascinating is how he evolved from a background conspiracist to an actual action hero. In Season 3, he infiltrated the secret Russian base beneath Starcourt Mall alongside Joyce, using his Russian language skills and knowledge of Soviet operations to navigate enemy territory. He's killed Russian soldiers. He's blown things up. He's been in hand-to-hand combat. This alcoholic, paranoid, middle-aged conspiracy theorist has proven himself to be surprisingly badass when circumstances require it. Season 4 took this even further. Murray traveled to Russia with Joyce to rescue Hopper, fighting his way through a Soviet prison, wielding flamethrowers, and generally being far more capable than anyone expected. He's become a genuinely skilled fighter despite having no formal training that we know of. It's played somewhat for laughs, the absurdity of this guy being so competent in life or death situations. But beneath the humor is a character who's found purpose and meaning in being part of something bigger than himself. And that's exactly why Murray is such a prime candidate for death. In Stranger Things, there's a clear pattern with supporting characters who become fan favorites. They're introduced, they're developed, they become beloved by the audience, and then they die heroically. Bob Newby followed this exact arc in Season 2, going from Joyce's sweet boyfriend to the man who sacrificed himself to save the others from demodogs in Hawkins' lab. Eddie Munson repeated the pattern in Season 4, starting as a polarizing character who quickly won hearts before dying to save Dustin. Murray has now been around for 3 seasons. He's had his character development. He's proven his worth. He's become a fan favorite. All the pieces are in place for a heroic death. And unlike with main characters, like Steve or Will, Murray's death wouldn't fundamentally alter the show's core relationships. He's important, but he's not part of the central family structures. His death would be sad, would be meaningful, but wouldn't devastate the emotional core of the show the way losing a Wheeler or a Byers would. There's specific fan speculation about how Murray might die that's gained traction on Reddit and other forums. The theory goes that Murray will lock himself in an enclosed space with a bunch of demodogs and demobats, then set the whole thing on fire, taking as many monsters with him as he can. This fits his character perfectly. He's dramatic, he's got a flair for the grandiose, and he's spent his whole life looking for meaning and purpose. Going out in a literal blaze of glory, sacrificing himself to help the main characters succeed, would be a fitting end. Brett Gelman, the actor who plays Murray, has expressed how much he loves the character and how meaningful the journey has been. He's praised the Duffer Brothers for taking what could have been a one-dimensional conspiracy theorist stereotype, and turning him into a fully realized person with depth and heroism. Gelman's investment in the character suggests he'd be on board with a powerful death scene that honors Murray's growth. From a practical storytelling perspective, Murray's death would serve several purposes. It would raise the stakes, showing that supporting characters aren't safe even after surviving multiple seasons. It would give Joyce and Hopper additional emotional weight, as they've become friends with Murray and relied on him in Russia. It would provide a heroic moment that allows for both action and tragedy, and it would thin out the cast a bit for the final episodes, focusing attention on the core group. There's also thematic resonance to Murray dying. He started the series paranoid and alone, convinced of conspiracies that no one else believed. He was isolated by his own refusal to accept comfortable lies, choosing harsh truths instead. Over the course of the show, he found community, found purpose, found people who believed him because they'd seen the same truths. His journey from isolation to connection, from paranoid loner to team member, would reach its completion in a sacrifice that protects his friends. He'd die knowing he was right all along, knowing he mattered, knowing he made a difference. For a character who spent so much of his life dismissed and ignored, that would be a meaningful ending. The concept of Murray having a badass death is important because it fits the show's tone. Stranger Things doesn't do misery porn. When characters die, especially heroic characters, they go out fighting. They go out doing something brave and crazy and memorable. Bob Newby didn't just die. He sacrificed himself intentionally, clearing a path for others even though he knew he probably wouldn't make it. Eddie Munson didn't just die. He stood his ground playing master of puppets while Demobats swarmed him. If Murray dies, it'll be similarly epic, a moment where the conspiracy theorist turned warrior has his crowning moment of awesome before the end. Some fans have suggested that Murray might not die at all, that the very fact everyone's talking about his potential death means the Duffer Brothers will subvert expectations and keep him alive. It's possible. Maybe Murray survives the final battle and gets to live out his days knowing he was vindicated, that the conspiracies he believed in were real and he helped defeat them. Maybe he goes back to his bunker in Illinois, but this time with friends who visit, with community rather than isolation. Maybe he writes a book about it, all that no one believes, but he doesn't care because he knows the truth. But honestly, that feels less likely than the alternative. Murray's character arc feels designed to build toward a sacrifice. He's the guy who was alone, who had nothing to lose, who found something worth fighting for and will do whatever it takes to protect it. And in the final battle against Vecna and the Upside Down, when the situation looks most desperate, when someone needs to do something insanely dangerous to give the others a chance, Murray will step up. He'll probably make some sarcastic comment about how he always knew it would end this way. He'll probably have one last drink of vodka, and then he'll do something crazy and brave and definitively Murray, something that buys time or creates an opening or saves lives, and he'll go out knowing he mattered, that the paranoid conspiracy theorist who everyone dismissed was a hero in the end. So raise a glass to Murray Bauman, the most unlikely badass in Hawkins. If this is his final season, He's earned a death worthy of his evolution from lonely drunk to fiery warrior. And the fans calling for his badass demise aren't being cruel. They're recognizing that sometimes the best endings for characters are the ones where they go out on their own terms, in a blaze of glory making a difference. Murray Bauman deserves that kind of ending. Max Mayfield, will she die for real this time? Now we come to one of the most complicated death theories in the entire show, the question of whether Max Mayfield, who technically already died at the end of Season 4, will truly die in Season 5. Max's status as both alive and not alive creates a unique situation where her ultimate fate could go in several directions, none of them particularly happy. Let's review what happened to Max in the Season 4 finale. She volunteered to be bait for Vecna, using herself as a lure so that Nancy, Steve, and Robin could attack him in the Upside Down while he was distracted. The plan almost worked. Max was in Vecna's curse, trapped in her own mind, reliving her trauma and guilt over her stepbrother Billy's death. Lucas was with her, playing her favorite song, Running Up That Hill, to try to anchor her to reality. But Vecna was too strong. He broke through her defenses and began killing her, breaking her arms and legs, blinding her eyes, the same gruesome death he'd inflicted on his previous victims. Max died. Her heart stopped for over a minute. Lucas held her broken body and begged her not to leave. And then 11, from thousands of miles away in a sensory deprivation tank, reached into whatever space Max's consciousness had retreated to and pulled her back. Max's heart started beating again, but she didn't wake up. She's been in a coma ever since, brain dead according to medical scans, with 11 somehow keeping her consciousness preserved in some liminal space between life and death. This creates several possibilities for Season 5. The first and most hopeful is that Max wakes up. 11 finds a way to fully restore her, bringing her consciousness back to her body. Max would be forever changed, blind and with injuries that might never fully heal, but she'd be alive. She'd have Lucas, who never gave up on her. She'd have her friends. She could begin the long process of recovery and trauma processing. This would be the happy ending for Max, or as happy as things get in Stranger Things. The second possibility is that Max remains in her coma throughout the season. The characters, especially Lucas, would be fighting not just to save Hawkins, but to save Max specifically. Finding a way to wake her up would be part of their motivation. 11 would be working to maintain the connection, keeping Max's consciousness intact, while also fighting Vecna. The emotional weight of this, the question of whether Max can be saved, would hang over the entire season, and then, in the end, either she wakes up or she doesn't, giving the story either a triumphant or tragic conclusion. The third possibility, the one that many fans dread, is that Max dies for real this time. Maybe Vecna finds a way to finish what he started. Maybe 11 can't maintain the connection during the final battle. Maybe the only way to defeat Vecna is for 11 to let Max go, to choose the world over her friend. This would be absolutely devastating. We'd have to watch Lucas lose her after sitting by her bedside, reading to her, holding her hand, believing she'd come back. We'd watch 11 deal with the guilt of not being able to save her. We'd see the group have to accept that not everyone makes it home, that sometimes love isn't enough. There's a specific scene in the Season 5 trailer that has fans worried. Lucas is shown carrying an unconscious Max, running from what appears to be Demodogs approaching. The setting looks like it might be a hospital or medical facility. This has led to speculation that Demodogs breach wherever Max is being kept, forcing Lucas to physically evacuate her while she's still comatose. Imagine the terror of that scene. Lucas desperately trying to protect someone who can't protect herself, carrying her broken body while monsters close in. Even if they survive that immediate threat, it highlights how vulnerable Max is, how easily she could be killed. Some fans have suggested that Max dying would be too much, that the show already put her through hell in season 4, and killing her now would feel cruel rather than dramatic. They argue that Sadie Sink's performance in the season 4 finale, especially the scene where Max is lifted into the air and broken by Vecna, was so powerful that it's already served the purpose of showing how dangerous Vecna is. Killing her for real wouldn't add much dramatically while taking away a beloved character. But there's a counter-argument. Max's current state, brain dead and preserved only by Eleven's power, isn't really living. She's trapped in limbo, unable to wake up, unable to communicate, unable to be present with the people who love her. From a certain perspective, letting her go would be a mercy rather than a cruelty, and her death would have massive emotional impact. Lucas has grown so much as a character, and his devotion to Max, even while she's comatose, shows the depth of his love. But maybe part of his growth is learning to let go, learning that sometimes you can't save someone, no matter how much you love them. There's also the question of what Max's consciousness is experiencing while she's in this coma. Is she aware? Is she dreaming? Is she trapped in some hellish limbo created by Vecna? We don't know, and that uncertainty is part of what makes her situation so tragic. If she's suffering while comatose, then death might actually be a release. But if she's in some peaceful state, waiting to be called back, then killing her robs her of that potential awakening. Eleven's role in Max's survival is particularly interesting. 11 has been carrying so much guilt throughout the series. Guilt about opening the gate that started everything. Guilt about creating Vecna by banishing one to the Upside Down. Guilt about not being strong enough to stop bad things from happening to the people she loves. If she has to choose between maintaining Max's consciousness and defeating Vecna, if she has to let Max die to save the world, that choice would haunt her forever. But it would also be a powerful moment of growth, 11 learning that she can't save everyone, that sometimes terrible choices have to be made. The most likely scenario, based on the evidence and the show's usual approach to these situations, is that Max wakes up at some point during the season. Maybe not fully healed, maybe still dealing with significant injuries and trauma, but conscious and herself. This would give Lucas his emotional payoff, the reward for his devotion. It would give 11 a victory after so much failure, and it would allow Max to participate in the final battle, to have agency in defeating the entity that almost killed her. Max is a fighter. She's never been content to be a victim. Having her wake up and immediately join the fight would be very much in character. But even if Max survives, she'll be forever changed. Vecna didn't just attack her body, he attacked her mind and soul. He dug into her deepest traumas, her guilt over Billy, her fear of becoming like her abusive father. Even if she physically recovers, those psychological wounds will remain. The Max who comes out of this won't be the same person who went in, and that loss of innocence, that permanent damage, is its own kind of death, even if her heart keeps beating. Whatever happens to Max in Season 5, her story represents one of the show's most gut-wrenching narrative threads. She's the character who's been hovering between life and death, who's already experienced what comes after, who's trapped in a state that's neither here nor there. Her ultimate fate, whether it's a miraculous recovery, a tragic true death, or something in between, will be one of the season's most emotionally resonant storylines. And Lucas, who's been there from the beginning, who never gave up hope, deserves to know one way or another whether his faith was rewarded or whether love sometimes just isn't enough to bring someone back from the dark. Hopper's second or final death. We need to discuss Jim Hopper and the very real possibility that the resurrection we celebrated in Season 4 was only temporary, that the father figure who came back from Russian imprisonment might not survive the final battle. Hopper's potential death is complicated by the fact that we've already been through this once, already mourned him, already celebrated his return. Would the Duffer Brothers really put us through that again? And more importantly, would killing Hopper for real this time have emotional impact, or would it feel like repeating the same beat? Let's start with Hopper's journey. When we met him in Season 1, he was a broken man. His daughter Sarah had died of cancer years earlier, and the grief had destroyed his marriage and nearly destroyed him. He was a small-town sheriff going through the motions, drinking too much, sleeping with women whose names he couldn't remember, disconnected from life. Will Byers' disappearance pulled him out of that fog. Investigating what happened to Will gave Hopper purpose again, and discovering 11 gave him a second chance at fatherhood. Over the seasons, we watched Hopper become a father to 11 in all the ways that mattered. He took her in, protected her, taught her about the world, tried to give her a normal childhood despite her extraordinary circumstances. Their relationship was the emotional core of Seasons 2 and 3. The scene where Hopper reads his letter to 11 at the end of Season 3, talking about how hard it is to let children grow up, about how scared he is of losing her, remains one of the most powerful moments in the series. And then, at the end of Season 3, Hopper appeared to sacrifice himself, staying behind to manually close the gate, while Joyce closed it from the outside, seemingly dying in the explosion. Except he didn't die. Season 4 revealed that Hopper survived, but was captured by Russians, imprisoned in a brutal labor camp in Kamchatka, forced to fight a Demogorgon for the guards' entertainment. Joyce and Murray mounted a rescue mission, traveling to Russia to bring him home. They succeeded, and Hopper was reunited with 11 and with Joyce, the woman he'd developed feelings for. It was a triumphant return, a second chance at life and love. But that second chance might be setting up a more permanent ending. There's a principle in storytelling sometimes called earned death. The idea is that if a character cheats death once, if they get that reprieve, their eventual death becomes more impactful because they got extra time, got to say goodbyes, got to make peace. Hopper already had his fake death. He already had his resurrection. If he dies for real in Season 5, it would be after having the chance to reconnect with 11, to start a relationship with Joyce, to make the most of his second chance. And narratively, that might make his death more acceptable, more earned, because he got those extra gifts of time first. The season 5 trailer shows Hopper and Eleven together quite a bit, which has fans both excited and worried. Excited because their father daughter relationship is beautiful and we want to see more of it. Worried because the show might be giving us that extra content, precisely because it's the last time we'll get it. There's a shot of them taking cover together during what appears to be a military assault, soldiers firing at Demogorgons while red warning lights flash. They're a team, working together, protecting each other. But that scene also highlights how dangerous their situation is. Think about what Hopper's death would mean thematically. He's already lost one daughter, Sarah, to illness. He couldn't save her, couldn't protect her from cancer, could only watch her waste away. That tragedy defined him for years. Now he has 11, a girl with the power to fight monsters and reshape reality, but who's also still just a kid who needs a father. If Hopper dies saving 11, dies protecting his adopted daughter in a way he couldn't protect his biological daughter, there's a painful poetry to that. It would be him getting the hero's death he wished he could have had for Sarah, the death where the father sacrifices himself so the child lives. But that same scenario would be absolutely devastating for Eleven. She's lost so many people. Her birth mother is alive but mentally broken, unable to care for her. Papa Brenner, despite being her abuser, was the closest thing to a father figure she had for years, and she watched him die. Now Hopper is her real father in all the ways that matter, the one person who's offered her unconditional love and safety and normalcy. If she loses him, if she has to watch another father figure die, it might break something in her. And perhaps that breaking is what the story needs. Perhaps Eleven needs to lose everything to find the strength to do what must be done to defeat Vecna. David Harbour, who plays Hopper, has been noticeably emotional. It's in interviews about the show ending. He's talked about Hopper's journey with genuine affection and has praised the Duffer Brothers for giving him such a complex character to play. When discussing Season 5, he's mentioned that Hopper's story comes to a meaningful conclusion, which could mean anything. It could mean he survives and gets his happy ending with Joyce and Eleven. Or it could mean he dies in a way that honors his character and his growth. There's practical considerations too. Harbour is a busy actor who's become much more prominent since Stranger Things started. He's starring in other projects, including the Gran Turismo movie and various other films. While he's expressed love for Hopper, killing the character would free Harbour from any obligation to return for potential future Stranger Things universe content. The Duffer Brothers have said there won't be a traditional spin-off continuing the main story, but having Hopper die would definitively close that door. Some fans argue that killing Hopper would be too cruel to Joyce Byers. She's already lost Bob Newby, her boyfriend from Season 2, who died saving everyone from Demodogs. She's already gone through the grief of thinking Hopper died, only to discover he was alive and mount a dangerous rescue mission to save him. To lose Hopper for real, to finally have him back only to lose him again, would be extraordinarily harsh. Joyce deserves a happy ending, deserves to have love and peace after all she's been through. Killing Hopper would rob her of that. But the counter argument is that Stranger Things has never been about giving everyone happy endings. It's been about showing that fighting evil has costs, that heroism often requires sacrifice, that good people die even when they don't deserve to. Joyce getting her happy ending would be nice, but it might not be realistic given the scale of the threat they're facing. And having Joyce survive but lose another man she loves would show the true cost of this war in a visceral way. The most compelling argument for Hopper surviving is simple. Eleven needs him. She spent her whole life as a weapon, as a tool used by others, as someone defined by her powers rather than her personhood. Hopper is one of the few people who sees her as Jane first, as a girl who deserves a normal life, as his daughter rather than a superhero. If Hopper survives the final battle, he can help Eleven navigate whatever comes next. He can be there for her as she processes her trauma, as she figures out who she is without the constant threat of monsters and experiments. He can be the father she deserves to have. But if Hopper dies, Eleven loses that anchor. She'd have Joyce, who's been a mother figure to her. She'd have Mike, who loves her. She'd have her friends. But Hopper's specific form of fatherly love, gruff and protective and completely devoted, would be gone. And maybe that loss is what pushes Eleven to fully embrace her own strength, to realize she doesn't need someone protecting her, that she can protect herself and others. Maybe Hopper's death is the tragedy that transforms Eleven into the fully realized hero she needs to be. My personal prediction, based on everything we've seen and the way these stories typically unfold, is that Hopper survives, but it's close. He'll have moments where it looks like he's going to die, where he puts himself in terrible danger to protect Eleven or Joyce or the others. We'll be on the edge of our seats, thinking the show is going to kill him for real this time. But in the end, he'll make it through. He'll get his happy ending with Joyce. He'll get to be a father to Eleven in peacetime, rather than just in crisis. He'll have earned his survival through everything he's endured. But I could be wrong. The Duffer Brothers might decide that Hopper's story is most complete with a final sacrifice, a death that's heroic and meaningful and saves the people he loves. If that's the choice they make, if Hopper does die in season 5, it should be powerful and emotional and worthy of the character. No cheap shock value death, no random casualty. If Jim Hopper falls, let it be while doing something impossibly brave, something that only he could do, something that saves Eleven and gives her the chance to win. Let his last words be to his daughter, telling her he loves her, telling her she's going to be okay, passing the torch from one generation's protector to the next. That would be a meaningful conclusion indeed. 11. The ultimate sacrifice. Now we reach the most crucial death theory of all, the question of whether Eleven, our protagonist, the girl with the psychic powers who's been at the center of Stranger Things since the first episode, will survive the final battle. This theory has been debated endlessly, and there's substantial evidence suggesting that Eleven's death might be how the series ultimately ends. Let's examine this possibility with the gravity it deserves. Eleven's entire existence has been defined by her powers and the responsibilities they bring. She was created, in a sense, by Dr. Brenner's experiments, a child given abilities she never asked for and then weaponized by the very people who should have protected her. Every gate that's opened, Every monster that's invaded Hawkins, every death and tragedy over 4 seasons can be traced back to events 11 was involved in. She made contact with the Demogorgon and opened the first gate. She banished one to the Upside Down, where he became Vecna. She's the reason the Upside Down is frozen in time on November 6, 1983. She's been both the cause of the problem and the only solution to it. That weight of responsibility has been crushing her. Throughout the series, Eleven has shouldered the burden of being the hero, of being the one with powers who has to save everyone. In Season 1, she sacrificed herself to destroy the Demogorgon, seemingly dying in the process before we learned she'd simply been transported to the Upside Down. In Season 2, she closed the gate at enormous personal cost, nearly dying from the effort. In Season 3, she lost her powers entirely after the battle with the Mind Flayer. And in Season 4, she regained her powers through traumatic regression therapy that forced her to relive the worst moments of her life. The question of whether Eleven will die has been circulating since before Season 5 even finished filming, but it gained significant traction after an appearance by Millie Bobby Brown on The Jonathan Ross Show. When asked about the show's ending, Brown stumbled over her words in a telling way. She said, "I know how my character, like what happens to my character," pausing in a way that suggested she'd almost revealed something she shouldn't. That hesitation was immediately analyzed by fans as a potential slip, a near admission that she knows Eleven's fate, and is significant enough that she had to be careful not to spoil it. If Eleven dies, it would likely be a sacrifice. The gates between our world and the Upside Down were opened by her power, so it makes thematic sense that closing them permanently might require her life. Perhaps her essence has to become the seal, her consciousness the barrier preventing the Upside Down from ever touching our world again. Perhaps defeating Vecna requires her to merge with the Upside Down itself, to fight him on his own terms in a battle that destroys them both. There are numerous ways the story could justify requiring Eleven's death, and most of them would be heartbreaking. Think about what Eleven's death would mean for the other characters. Mike Wheeler, who found her in the woods in Episode 1, who gave her a home in his basement, who fell in love with her, would be shattered. Their relationship has been one of the emotional anchors of the series. Mike telling Eleven he loves her in the Season 4 finale was what gave her the strength to fight back against Vecna. If she dies, Mike loses not just his girlfriend, but the girl who opened his eyes to the possibility that the world is stranger and more wonderful than he ever imagined. Hopper, if he survives, would lose another daughter. Just when he's rebuilt his relationship with Eleven, just when they've become a real family, she'd be taken from him. The parallel to losing Sarah would be devastating, but there'd also be a difference. Sarah died of illness, something Hopper was powerless to prevent. If Eleven dies saving the world, it would be her choice, her agency, her power. Hopper would have to find a way to be proud of her heroism while grieving her loss. Joyce, who's been a mother figure to Eleven, would grieve as well. The rest of the party, Max and Lucas, and Dustin and Will, would all be processing the loss of their friend who was also their protector. Eleven dying would leave a hole in the lives of everyone we've been following for 5 seasons, and that's precisely why her death would be so powerful. It would show that evil can be defeated, but the cost might be everything. It would show that sometimes heroes don't get to see the world they saved. It would show that power comes with a price, and sometimes that price is your life. But there's another possibility, one that's perhaps more likely given the show's history and tone. Instead of dying, Eleven might lose her powers permanently. She's lost them before, in Season 3, and spent Season 4 getting them back. But what if the final defeat of Vecna requires her to burn out her abilities completely? To use every ounce of psychic energy she has until there's nothing left? She'd survive physically, but the powers that defined her, that made her special, that made her both a weapon and a hero, would be gone forever. This outcome would be bittersweet in interesting ways. Eleven has said before that she wants to be normal, wants to just be a regular girl without the burden of saving everyone. Losing her powers would give her that normalcy. She could go to school, have a regular life, grow up without the constant threat of being hunted by governments or monsters. She could be Jane Hopper, not Eleven the Experiment. In some ways, that would be a happy ending, the girl getting the peaceful life she always wanted. But it would also be a loss. Eleven's powers are part of her identity. She's learned to embrace them as part of who she is, not just as a burden, but as something that makes her unique and capable. Losing them would be like losing a limb, a fundamental part of herself gone forever. And there would always be the knowledge that she gave them up, that she made the choice to sacrifice her abilities to save others. Living with that choice, with the ghost of who she used to be, would be its own kind of challenge. There's also the question of whether Eleven can even be killed by normal means. She survived being in the Upside Down in Season 1. She's pulled off incredible feats of psychic power. In Season 4, she remote viewed across the country to fight Vecna, while simultaneously keeping Max alive. She's been shot at, hunted, tortured, and she keeps surviving. Perhaps she's become so intertwined with the Upside Down and with psychic energy that she's transcended normal mortality. Perhaps death, for Eleven, would look different than death for anyone else. Some fan theories suggest that Eleven doesn't die, but becomes trapped in the Upside Down, unable to return but still alive, still conscious. This would be a callback to her fake death in Season 1, where everyone thought she'd died destroying the Demogorgon, but she'd actually just been transported. If Eleven ends up trapped in the Upside Down, it would be bittersweet. She'd be alive, but separated from everyone she loves, unable to have the normal life she wanted, forever isolated in that dark dimension. The series could end with Mike and the others knowing she's out there somewhere, waiting, hoping someday they'll find a way to bring her home. Actor Millie Bobby Brown has been open in interviews about how emotional the ending is, how satisfied she feels with Eleven's conclusion, how the journey has been meaningful. These comments suggest the ending honors the character, whether that means death, power loss, or something else entirely. Brown has grown up playing Eleven, starting as a child actress and becoming a young adult over the course of the show. In some ways, Eleven's journey mirrors Brown's own coming of age, and ending that journey in a way that feels right is crucial. The argument for Eleven surviving is simple but powerful. She deserves to live. After everything she's been through, After all the times she's saved everyone, after growing from a scared girl with a shaved head who could barely speak to a young woman who knows her own worth and power, she deserves to have a future. She deserves to go to high school, to have a normal relationship with Mike, to have Hopper walk her down the aisle someday, to have the life she was robbed of by Brenner's experiments. Killing her, or trapping her, or stripping her of her powers would feel cruel after all she's endured. But the argument for Eleven sacrificing herself is equally powerful. It would complete her arc. She started as a weapon, something created and used by others. She'd end as a hero who made her own choice, who wielded her power not because she was ordered to, but because she chose to protect the people she loved. She'd transform from victim to savior through her own agency, her own decision. And sometimes, the most heroic thing a character can do is give everything for others. My prediction, based on the tone of the show and the Duffer Brothers' approach to storytelling, is that Eleven survives but loses her powers. She closes the gates permanently by exhausting her abilities, burning them out to seal the Upside Down away forever. She wakes up after the battle, human in every way. No powers, no connection to the other dimension. Just Jane Hopper, a teenager who finally gets to be normal. And in the epilogue, we see her living that normal life, maybe going to college, maybe married to Mike, maybe just happily ordinary. And while there's grief for what she lost, there's also peace in knowing she's finally free. But I could be wrong. The Duffer Brothers might choose the tragic ending, might have Eleven die heroically, might show us Mike and Hopper grieving at her grave, might end the series on the bittersweet note that the girl who saved everyone couldn't save herself. If that's how it ends, it will be devastating, but it might also be beautiful in its tragedy, a reminder that heroes sometimes pay the ultimate price, and that their sacrifice is what allows others to live and love and carry on. The new character. Curse, Derek Turnbow and Dr. Bakesoy. Let's discuss a pattern that Stranger Things has established over its run, a pattern that doesn't bode well for new characters introduced in Season 5. Specifically, we need to talk about Derek Turnbow and Dr. K, two newcomers who are at serious risk of becoming Season 5's version of Bob or Eddie or any other beloved character who was introduced only to be killed off by the end of their debut season. The pattern is clear and consistent. Stranger Things introduces a new character who initially seems polarizing or even unlikable. Bob Newby seemed like a corny, overly cheerful stepdad type when we first met him in Season 2. Eddie Munson seemed like an over-the-top, dramatic metalhead who might cause problems when we first met him in Season 4. But then the show spends its season developing these characters, giving them depth and heart, making us grow to love them. We see Bob's genuine kindness, his love for Joyce and the boys, his heroism in the face of demodogs. We see Eddie's loyalty to his friends, his protectiveness over the younger kids in Hellfire Club, his willingness to face his fears. We fall in love with these characters. And then the show kills them, usually in a heroic sacrifice that destroys us emotionally. This pattern exists for a reason. The Duffer Brothers want to have meaningful deaths, want to show that the stakes are real, but they're reluctant to kill off the main cast that's been there since Season 1, so they introduce new characters who can be developed and then sacrificed without fundamentally altering the core group dynamics. It's a clever narrative strategy, but it means that any new character immediately comes under suspicion of being marked for death. Enter Derek Turnbow, played by Jake Connolly. Based on the limited information available, Derek is described as a bully character, someone antagonistic to the main group. His very name references the Turnbow family and their real estate development company that's been mentioned in set photos and promotional materials. Some fans speculate that the Turnbow family might have connections to Hawkins' history, possibly even to the origins of the lab or the town's supernatural problems. If Derek follows the typical pattern, he'll start as an antagonist, or at least as an obstacle for our heroes. Maybe he's bullying the younger kids, maybe he's working against them somehow, maybe he's just another problem to deal with, while Vecna is tearing Hawkins apart. But then, as the season progresses, we'll learn there's more to him. Maybe he's acting tough to hide fear. Maybe he's got family problems that explain his behavior. Maybe he's actually a good person underneath the bully exterior. We'll see him start to soften, start to help the main characters, maybe even form a friendship with one of them. And then, just when we've started to like Derek, just when we think he might survive to get a redemption arc in a hypothetical season 6 that doesn't exist, he'll die, probably saving one of the kids, probably in a moment that shows he's overcome his character flaws, probably with last words that hit us right in the feels. Fans on Reddit have already predicted this exact arc, with one fan writing that Derek is definitely not surviving, that he's being set up as the new Bob Sosmalexi, Eddie's side character, introduced in season that everyone loves and ends up dying. The fact that fans can see this coming doesn't necessarily mean it won't happen or won't be effective. Even when we know the pattern, even when we're bracing for the death, it still hurts when it happens because the show does such a good job of making us care about these characters in the limited time they have. Eddie Munson's death devastated fans, even though many had predicted he was doomed from his first appearance. The execution matters more than the surprise. Then there's Dr. K, played by Linda Hamilton. Yes, that Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor herself from the Terminator franchise. Having an actress of Hamilton's caliber and action movie pedigree join the cast for the final season is exciting, but it's also concerning. Dr. K is described as a government official, someone involved with investigating or hunting down 11. Given that Stranger Things has never been kind to government officials or scientists who oppose our heroes, Dr. K's survival odds seem low. Linda Hamilton's presence suggests that Dr. K will be a formidable character, someone with authority and capability. But historically, government operatives in Stranger Things don't fare well. They're either revealed to be villains who deserve their deaths, like the agents working for Brenner in Season 1, or they're bureaucrats in over their heads who get killed by the supernatural forces they're trying to contain. Dr. K, being portrayed by Hamilton, might be more capable than most, might put up a better fight. But in the end, she's still a government stooge interfering with Eleven and her friends, and the show has been pretty clear about how it treats those characters. The most likely scenario for Dr. K is that she starts as an antagonist, hunting Eleven because she believes Eleven is dangerous or responsible for the chaos in Hawkins. She'll be following orders, doing what she thinks is right, possibly even believing she's protecting people. But then she'll witness the true horror of the Upside Down, see what Vecna is really doing, and realize that Eleven isn't the threat, she's humanity's only hope. Dr. K will switch sides, using her authority and resources to help our heroes instead of hindering them. And then, having redeemed herself, having proven she's one of the good guys, Dr. K will probably die. Maybe she gets caught in the crossfire between Eleven and Vecna. Maybe she sacrifices herself to buy time for the kids to escape. Maybe she gets torn apart by Demogorgons or Demobats in a scene that showcases Linda Hamilton's action chops one more time. However it happens, Dr. K feels like a character being set up for a heroic but fatal redemption. The meta reason for these new character deaths is worth considering. The Duffer Brothers want Season 5 to have weight, to have real consequences, to feel like a true ending. But they also know that killing off too many main characters would risk making the ending too dark, too depressing, unsatisfying for audiences who've invested years in these people. So they thread the needle by introducing new characters who can die meaningfully, raising the stakes and providing emotional gut punches without destroying the core cast. Derek and Dr. K are, unfortunately for them, likely to be sacrificial lambs in service of that narrative goal. There's a small chance that the Duffer Brothers will subvert their own pattern this time. Maybe they're aware that fans expect new characters to die, so they'll keep Derek and Dr. K alive as a surprise. Maybe both characters survive and get to appear in the epilogue, showing that not everyone introduced in the final season is doomed. But honestly, that feels unlikely. The pattern is too established, too effective, too much a part of how Stranger Things tells stories about heroism and sacrifice. So let's pour one out in advance for Derek Turnbow and Dr. Chase K, two characters we haven't really met yet, but who are probably marked for death anyway. When they die, likely in the back half of the season, after we've had time to grow attached to them, we'll mourn them even though we saw it coming. Because that's what Stranger Things does best. It makes us care about people and then breaks our hearts by taking them away. And these new characters, whoever they really turn out to be, are walking into the final season with targets painted on their backs. Multiple deaths and the structure of the final battle. Now we need to discuss something that the Duffer Brothers have been clear about. Season 5 won't just have one or two deaths. They've promised multiple casualties, a true final battle with costs that rival Game of Thrones level carnage. Let's talk about what that means and try to predict how these deaths will be structured throughout the season's 3-part release. Ross Duffer told Entertainment Weekly explicitly that Season 5 is a brutal season, very violent, with the stakes higher than ever. Matt Duffer added that because you're hurtling through the end, a lot more is on the table. They've also said that any deaths will feel earned, which suggests they're not just killing characters for shock value, but because those deaths serve the story. This is both reassuring and terrifying. Reassuring because it means the deaths will mean something, will be dramatically satisfying, even in their tragedy. Terrifying because it suggests they've thought carefully about who dies and why, which means they're confident in their choices, even knowing how much those choices will hurt. The comparison to Game of Thrones is telling. That show became famous, or infamous, for killing off major characters regularly, for subverting expectations about who was safe, for showing that heroism often ended in death rather than victory. If Stranger Things is aiming for that level of brutality, we should be prepared for multiple main character deaths, not just supporting players. Let's think about how this might be structured across the season's three-part release. Part 1, with 4 episodes dropping November 26th, will likely establish the post-season 4 situation. Hawkins under quarantine, the Upside Down spreading, the characters gathering and preparing for the final battle. This part might include 1 or 2 deaths to establish stakes, probably supporting characters or new characters to show that the Duffer Brothers aren't kidding around this time. This would be when someone like Murray might die heroically, or when Dr. K might be killed by the forces she was trying to contain. Part 2, with 3 episodes on Christmas Day, would be the middle section where the battle escalates. This is where we might lose 1 or 2 more characters, possibly including a main cast member. Steve or Jonathan might die in this section, or Will or Hopper. The Christmas Day release date is interesting. It's a holiday typically associated with family and celebration, so dropping episodes with major character deaths on Christmas would be a bold, somewhat sadistic choice. But it would also make those episodes incredibly memorable. The finale, streaming December 31st on New Year's Eve, would be the climactic final battle and resolution. This single episode, which will probably be feature-length, given how much story it needs to wrap up, is where the biggest deaths would occur. This might be where Eleven makes her final sacrifice, if that's the direction they're going. This might be where multiple characters die in the fight against Vecna. Releasing the finale on New Year's Eve, at the cusp of moving from one year to another, symbolically represents endings and new beginnings. Perfect thematic timing for the series' conclusion. Now, if we're going to have multiple main character deaths, which combinations make the most narrative sense? Let's game out a few scenarios. Scenario 1. Steve and Jonathan both die. This resolves the love triangle definitively while devastating Nancy, giving her enormous grief and survivor's guilt to process. It shows that the men who loved her both sacrificed themselves, possibly even to save her. This would be incredibly dark, but would cement Nancy as a survivor who has to carry on despite losing both potential futures she'd envisioned. Scenario 2. Hopper and Will die. Hopper sacrifices himself to save Eleven, completing his arc from broken man to devoted father. Will sacrifices himself to close the connection between our world and the Upside Down, completing his arc from victim to hero. Both deaths would devastate Eleven and Joyce respectively, while also being thematically powerful. Scenario 3. Steve and Murray die as the older brother figures, with one or both Wheeler parents dying to show that even families on the periphery aren't safe. This combination would hurt, but wouldn't destroy the core emotional relationships as much as losing people like Mike or Eleven or Joyce. Scenario 4. One of the original boys dies, probably Mike or Will, along with Steve and either Hopper or Jonathan. This would be absolutely brutal, showing that the friend group that started this journey won't all finish it together. Losing Mike would destroy Eleven. Losing Will would destroy Joyce and Jonathan and Mike. Either death would hit hard. The Duffer Brothers have suggested they want the ending to be bittersweet rather than purely tragic. That suggests not everyone dies, that there is victory and hope even amidst the loss. The structure would probably be something like significant losses that hurt deeply, but enough survivors to carry on, to rebuild, to show that life continues even after tragedy. The epilogue would show those survivors moving forward, possibly years later, having processed their grief and found new purpose or peace. What we need to prepare for emotionally is that our favorite character probably won't make it. If you love Steve, he might die. If you love Will, he might die. If you love Hopper or Jonathan or Murray, they might die. The Duffer Brothers have the whole cast on the table, and earned deaths means they're going to choose the deaths that hurt the most while serving the story best. Our tears are part of the plan. But here's a crucial point. Death isn't the only way to create permanent loss and stakes. Max is already in a coma and might never fully recover even if she wakes up. Eleven might lose her powers permanently. Characters might be psychologically scarred in ways that never fully heal. The town of Hawkins itself might be so damaged that it becomes uninhabitable, forcing everyone to leave their homes and scatter. Loss comes in many forms, and not all of them require death certificates. My prediction for the overall death count: at least 3 to 5 main or major supporting characters die, with several others suffering permanent injuries or losses that change them forever. The final death toll will be high enough to be shocking, to prove the Duffer Brothers meant what they said about being brutal, but not so high that it feels gratuitous or like they just killed everyone for shock value. And each death will serve the story, will mean something, will be part of a character's completed arc, or a catalyst for another character's growth. As we approach the release of Season 5, Part 1, we should prepare ourselves for goodbyes. Say your mental farewells to the characters you love most, because there's a good chance some of them won't make it to the end. Stock up on tissues. Gather your fellow fans for watch parties where you can grieve together. And remember that even in tragedy, there can be meaning. The characters who die will die as heroes, will die protecting the people and the world they love. And that's not nothing. That's everything. We've spent a lot of time discussing the obvious candidates for death: Steve and Jonathan and Will and all the others who feel marked for tragedy. But let's talk about some characters whose deaths would genuinely shock audiences because they seem safer than they actually are. These are the deaths no one is really predicting, the ones that could blindside us completely if the Duffer Brothers decide to be truly bold. Erica Sinclair is one character who seems untouchable. She's Lucas's younger sister, a smart-mouthed kid who's been a scene stealer since she was introduced. The idea of killing Erica feels almost taboo, not just because she's young, but because her character provides comic relief and attitude that balances the heavier storylines. Fans love her. The Duffer Brothers would have to be incredibly bold to kill a young kid who's beloved and funny and has so much life ahead of her. But consider this: Erica has proven herself capable and brave. She infiltrated the Russian base in Season 3. She's been part of the action, has faced danger, has shown she can handle herself. And from a narrative perspective, killing a child character would raise the stakes in a way that nothing else could. It would show that truly no one is safe, that the Upside Down doesn't discriminate based on age or plot armor. Erica's death would devastate Lucas, would traumatize the audience, would be the darkest possible choice the show could make. Do I think they'll do it? Probably not. Killing children is a line most television shows won't cross, especially a show like Stranger Things that, despite its horror elements, has always maintained a certain level of not innocence exactly, but a sense that the kids are protected by narrative necessity. But the fact that it's even a possibility we're considering shows how uncertain everything has become in Season 5. Dustin Henderson is another character who seems safe, but might not be. He's the heart of the friend group, the one who keeps spirits up, the one whose relationship with Steve has been one of the show's highlights. Gaten Matarazzo said in an interview that he wants the stakes to be higher in Season 5, and revealed that when asked who he thinks will die, he answered, "I'm going for myself." He said he hopes it would be toward the end if it happens, so he can hang out with his friends as much as possible first. Now, actors often joke about their characters dying, and Matarazzo might have just been being dramatic or self-deprecating. But it's also possible he's been told something about Dustin's fate and is trying to prepare fans in a roundabout way. Dustin dying would be absolutely crushing. He's already lost Eddie, his mentor and friend from the Hellfire Club. If he also lost Steve, or if he himself became the sacrifice, it would destroy viewers. But it would also be dramatically powerful, showing that not even the most lovable characters are guaranteed survival. Then there's Robin Buckley. She's become a fan favorite since her introduction in Season 3, and her friendship with Steve is one of the show's purest relationships. Robin dying would devastate Steve without being romantically tragic, which is an interesting narrative space. She's also LGBTQ representation on the show, and killing her would risk falling into the bury your gays trope that has plagued television for years. The Duffer Brothers are presumably aware of this and would hopefully avoid it. But representation doesn't equal immunity from death in a story this dark. Joyce Byers is probably the safest character on the entire show. She's played by Winona Ryder. She's been the emotional anchor of the adult storyline. She's the mother who would move heaven and earth for her children. The Duffer Brothers killing Joyce would be shocking beyond words. It would be the ultimate tragedy, the mother who fought so hard losing her battle at the last moment. But it's that very safety, that sense that obviously Joyce survives, that makes her an interesting target if the show really wants to subvert expectations. If Joyce died saving Will or Jonathan, if she made the ultimate maternal sacrifice, it would recontextualize the entire series. All of her struggles, all of her desperate searches and battles would have been building to that final moment of protecting her children one last time. Will and Jonathan would have to carry on without the mother who defined so much of their lives. It would be almost too tragic to contemplate, which might be exactly why the Duffer Brothers would consider it. Nancy Wheeler feels less safe than she used to. She's been the gun-wielding investigative journalist, the one who's faced down Demogorgons and Vecna and kept fighting. But that very heroism makes her a target. Nancy dying would shock audiences because she's been so capable, so central to the action for so long, and yet the scene of her crying while washing blood off her hands suggests she might lose someone close to her, or she might be the one who's lost. If Nancy dies, The Wheeler family is torn apart. Mike loses his sister. Holly and her parents lose a daughter. Steve and Jonathan both lose the girl they loved. The ripple effects would be enormous. Mike Wheeler is probably the least likely of the original boys to die, if only because he's Eleven's boyfriend and the de facto leader of the party. His death would devastate Eleven at a time when she needs to be strongest. It would destroy the friend group's dynamic in a fundamental way. But that's also why Mike's death would be so impactful. If the show really wanted to demonstrate that no one is safe, that even characters who seem central to the story can be lost, Mike would be the way to do it. Lucas Sinclair has been somewhat sidelined in recent seasons, which could either mean he's safe or that he's being positioned for a tragic arc. If Max wakes up and then they lose Lucas, or if Lucas dies trying to protect Max, it would be heartbreaking. Their love story has been one of the show's most genuine, all awkwardness and middle school sweetness and genuine caring. Tearing that apart by killing Lucas would show the cost of this war in intimate personal terms. The pattern we're seeing is that almost anyone could die. The Duffer Brothers have shown willingness to kill off beloved characters before, and they've promised that Season 5 is more brutal than anything that came before. The characters who seem safest, the Joyces and Dustins and Ericas of the world, might actually be the ones most at risk precisely because their deaths would be so unexpected. And that uncertainty, that genuine fear that anyone we love might not make it, is what will make Season 5 almost unbearably tense. As we watch these final episodes, we need to prepare for the possibility that the death that hurts most will be the one we never saw coming.